ultimately, and I've always said this, it doesn't matter whether you don't have to be like queer and Latino to understand my poetry or my Spanglish or what I'm saying,
Mhm.
um, because it could be universal. Somewhere in there you could identify. And I've had like, different audiences. I've read in front of different audiences, and the best is like with some like little old white lady from the Midwest comes up and tells me, that they've been in my shoes or they've experienced something similar to what I have or whatever. And it's just so beautiful because it brings people together.
This is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Thanks for joining us here in the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. If you don't know, you can get all of our episodes ad-free on Patreon, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. All of Mary's true crime episodes ad-free, video episodes ad-free from the ITBR interviews. Also, follow us on Instagram, please. Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I like to put a lot of exciting arts and culture clips from the podcast, you know, TV shows, films that we've discussed. TikTok is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Long story, the Ivory Tower Boiler Room one uh, got taken off by TikTok because it was too salacious and scandalous, in my opinion. But I might be just having an Oscar Wilde complex there, thinking, that I was causing such a sensation on TikTok. So please rate us on Apple. It really, really helps. Review us. If you're on Spotify, you can rate us there too. YouTube, please follow our YouTube channel. Please like the video, share it with your friends, your community. The only way that I can keep giving you all free, exciting podcast episodes is because of the reach of the podcast. So, rating us, reviewing us, it really, really does help. Also, shout out to Sean, our intern, who, if you see the cover art, you see the edits of the podcast, that's all Sean. So, amazing work by Sean. So, I hope you all enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby, and I'm so excited to be joined with a poet who I've been just really dying to talk to, Emanuel Xavier, who I want to read you a little about, who Emmanuel is, and he has a very multifaceted life. So he's a Brooklyn-born poet whose work bridges spoken word, literary poetry, and queer cultural history. He's the author of several poetry collections. The one we're going to talk about is called Still We Are Sacred. He also wrote Lovely Child, Pure Queen, Americano, If Jesus Were Gay, Nefarious, and Radiance. His work draws from memory, family history, and the lasting effects of violence, migration, religion, and cultural expectation. His writing examines power within families and communities with clarity and restraint. He's known for direct, unornamented language. We appreciate that. Xavier's work insists on complexity rather than resolution. He's recognized as an LGBTQ plus icon by the Equality Forum. He's been a finalist for the Lambda Literary Awards and the International Latino Book Awards. His work has appeared in Poetry, Best American Poetry, and numerous other publications. And he's currently working on a memoir and a screenplay based on his novel called Christ-like. So, welcome to the podcast, Emmanuel.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about this.
Yeah, so, I'm really curious with this work, Still We Are Sacred, but I know a lot of your poetry work kind of stems from your like involvement in the drag queer ball culture, which, I had told you I'm teaching a queer studies course, and I always love bringing up Paris is Burning and, the TV show Pose as well. So, like, I mean, Cats the musical, they're really embracing that ball culture with the Jellicle ball. So I'm just curious, like, how did your involvement get started with the ball culture in the 1980s?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you so much for teaching Paris is Burning to your students
Mm,
because it is such an important documentary. I was 16 and out at the West Side Highway Piers after my mom kicked me out.
Mm,
I knew of the documentary, but I wasn't as involved with the ball scene because my focus was survival. So I was
mm,
hustling and
mm,
doing what I needed to do out at the piers in order to make it to the next day. But I became really good friends with Willie Ninja, and I stayed with Angie Extravaganza for some time.
mm,
And eventually I met Jenny Livingston, who was already filming the documentary.
mm,
And I remember attending the premiere and thinking, wow, this is so amazing, but had no idea that it was going to become so culturally impactful as it has. And
mm,
Jenny and I have remained friends throughout the years. And, I mean, what it taught me, as far as poetry was, how to be real, how to, be fierce and how to be strong.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. And do you feel that Pose and like what's going on with the Jellicle Ball, do you feel that they pay like historic homage, like they've done a nice job representing the authenticity of the ball culture, or do you feel like it's kind of more of a marketing uh or misrepresenting what happened during the ball culture and its history?
Um, well, it's funny. I took a workshop with Stephen Canals, who was, responsible for Pose.
Mm.
And, I just had an interview with Jenny Livingston at the Stonewall National Monument Visitor Center as part of my book launch.
Yeah.
And we discussed all of this, and it was just kind of like, you know, um, there are elements that were not historically factual, perhaps, but I could see where they were necessary in, bringing in a new generation, a new audience,
Mm,
to experience what that was like. For me, it's complicated emotions because I was part of that scene, um, but I'm thrilled that, it has come so far and gotten the exposure that it's received. There's a children's book coming out in I think next week about Willie Ninja, which
no.
I'm really excited about because it's so
Yeah.
beautiful and he'd be so honored and so happy. So to see it on Broadway and like Cats the Jellicle Ball and to see it up on television on like Pose and shows like Legendary and and
Mm,
being mentioned on RuPaul's Drag Race like
mm,
in each episode, um it's so special because this is a part of our history that so many people did not want us to share, for
yeah.
such a long time, especially during that time. It was all about, we're gay, but we're just like everybody else.
Mm,
So anyone who was a person of color or who was trans or who was from the leather community or, whatever was considered like outsiders that nobody wanted to talk about. So it's beautiful to see that our diversity is celebrated, you
mm.
know.
Well, and I feel like Ryan Murphy's best show is Pose. Well,
Mhm.
that and American Horror Story Coven, in my opinion.
Yes.
Uh, but like even just Pose, the way that it centers
hmm
trans actors,
Yeah.
um, the like queer of color community, like I
hmm
really thought it really is such an amazing representation. Very
hmm
different than I didn't see this film, but I don't know if you remember that Stonewall film that came out and it was like
Yeah, I
so
didn't see
whitewashed.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I feel like Stonewall, there's been a lot of misremembering. Like it's
hmm
good that they have that documentary. Is it called Happy Birthday, Marsha, for Marsha P. Johnson's history
I
or
believe
something like that?
so.
Um,
It's
yeah.
you know, it's like the Bible, for example. It's
Yeah.
something that, it's gonna like, between what actually happened and the stories that are being shared and told and celebrated, you know, a lot, there's been a lot of different versions of it, you
Mm,
know, and some of it is perhaps correct, and some of it is perhaps just accentuated to make it more palatable to a larger audience.
yeah.
But
Well,
yeah, no, go
no,
ahead.
well, and I was gonna say what I love so much about your work is that you don't make the reader like you're not trying to make your reader be comfortable or try to present a sanitized version of whether it's like your autobiographical elements in your poetry. I mean, I just remember there's a blurb at the beginning by John Compton, a fellow poet, where it's like the first poem in Still We Are Sacred puts a shotgun in your mouth and screams, "Try me." And then it drops you, and the next poem drops you. And by the time you're finished with this collection, you're almost as wounded as the poet. And I thought like that like so nicely captures like you want us to sit in that
Yeah.
uncomfortability or even just like not just present this like fairy tale image.
Yeah, because like it's so important. Like for example, like during the period that I was out at the pier, there was so much beauty, but there was also a lot of struggle.
Mm,
There was also poverty, there was HIV, there was loss, and I think my poetry tries to carry both truths at the same time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so how do you reconcile or just sit with, maybe not reconcile, but sit with like those calls from a younger generation who's like, oh, remember the peers, like, um, young queer men, they got to like just lay out naked and like there was the adult cinemas and like they kind of like put in this nostalgia.
Hmm.
Like, do you feel that, like you're saying, there was beauty, but it wasn't always beauty? There wasn't always beauty
Yeah,
in
it's all
these
about
spaces.
nostalgia, but that's, I mean, I was born and raised in New York, so I grew up learning to love like, the beautiful views of the city, but also appreciate, the homeless person on the street, you
Mm,
know. Um, that's the dichotomy. That's what makes New York. You're able to see all of it. You're not walking in with, blindfolds.
mm,
You have to accept the reality, and I think, and that's what I love is that there's a younger generation that's embracing this period, this culture, this nostalgia, but it's important at the same time for those of us, that were there, that have the opportunity to share our versions of it or our historical interpretations of what it was like.
mm. Like, do you miss the neighborhood, like the way that Greenwich Village just centered queer life, or do you prefer like the way that things are like the integration of queer life in different like parts of the city?
Um, Well, I mean, change is important, change is constant. And I do miss, just being able to go down. I was asked at the Stonewall National Monument Visitor Center where I consider home because I've lived in Queens and Brooklyn and Staten Island, the Bronx. And to me, it was always Christopher Street. It was always the piers. That's where I felt home. I knew those streets like the back of my hand, and I could walk around and just feel comfortable being myself. And that will always be there. But it's beautiful that you can go anywhere and sort of feel welcome and have a safe space. I mean, not
Mm,
necessarily anywhere, but most places.
mm,
Um, so I do appreciate that. And yeah, I get caught up in the nostalgia of it all and miss, what it used to be like and what used to be here and what used to be there. But I can also, you know, fall in love with like the cool new coffee shop or the cool new
mhm.
restaurant or or the cool new bookstore. But
Yeah, yeah. Um, and like I know a lot of your poetry. Well, first, like when I teach poetry with my students, I always say like, oh, you can't assume the speaker of the poem is like the person themselves who's the
hmm
poet. So like I kind of call it the autobiographical speaker, like if it's
hmm
highly influenced by the poet's life. But like why poetry for you? Like what is it about poetry that allows you to access something creatively?
Well, I grew up like most people thinking that poetry was just Shakespeare and that it had to rhyme. And it was the
Mm,
first time that I walked into the New Eureka Poets Cafe in the Lower East Side and I heard spoken word poetry.
mm,
And it was just very real. It was very raw. It was very honest. It didn't necessarily rhyme. And it was like, wow, I was totally blown away. And this was like in the mid 90s when spoken word poetry had just kind of emerged from like hip hop, and
mm,
rap music. So it wasn't necessarily always welcoming to like a
mm,
queer voice going up there and talking about, being out on the streets and, you know, being gay and being in love and sexuality and so forth. Um, but there were a few of us that were out there. We were pushing through and we were pushing forward. And I'm happy that we're at a place where there's so many like queer spoken word artists and poets that are like highly celebrated and have so many opportunities that, we didn't necessarily have back then. Um,
mm,
so yeah, for me, I mean, poetry was just very healing. It was just an opportunity to speak my truth and share my voice and capture this history.
mm,
Because I always say when I first started writing, I didn't want like some older white guy from Kansas to tell my story.
mm,
I'm sure they could do a great job of it, but I I, I wanted to share authentically,
mm.
as a brown queer person who maybe didn't have those opportunities for, education or access.
Yeah, and like the
New
Nuyorican,
Yorican Poets
Nuyorican,
Cafe.
yes, the
New York
Nuyorican,
Rican.
I love it. No, Nuyorican, right? So New York and Puerto Rican,
Yes.
right? This
Yes.
like nice
Yes.
blending. Was that in Alphabet Village or Alphabet?
It was in
Yeah.
the Lower East Side. I mean, it's still
Okay.
there. I mean, they're just closed right now for renovations, but they're opening up again this fall.
Okay.
And it was started by Miguel Algarín and Miguel Piñero and some other poets. And it was just a safe space for poets to come in and share their work,
Yeah.
in a very welcoming space. And it was a
Yeah.
very, it's a very significant part of New York City culture.
Yeah. I think I mean Alphabet City. Yeah. But um, right, that was like the
Lower
East
East Side, or
Village,
what
the
we
Lower
call the
East Side.
Loisama.
Like the Lower East Side in the 90s,
Hmm
like, I mean, there was so much art going on, like, right, with
Yes.
poetry,
hmm
painting, just like a very bohemian heartbeat.
Yes.
Um, do you feel like those spaces are harder to find now because of capitalism's just continuous making places unaffordable in the city? Or like these communities, like you're saying, they do still exist in certain spaces?
They still exist. I think things have just evolved, and it's just a matter of finding these spaces and these venues. Of course, yes, there is capitalism, but I just did an event at this fantastic bookstore called Possible Futures
Mm.
in New Haven. And I loved it. It was such a vibe. There was that energy, the people that go there, and just being surrounded by these incredible books and art. And it just felt like, and who would have thought, New Haven,
Yeah.
Connecticut, But it's just these places still exist. People are still pushing to make them viable for everyone. Um, it's just a matter, like I said, of finding things because obviously things have changed with like, the internet and cell phones and, just
Yeah.
everything. So it's just a matter of finding these places, but they are out there. Like there are amazing independent bookstores and venues and artists and books and,
Yeah. Yeah, I find like I'm right outside the city in North Jersey. I'm
hmm
in Secaucus,
hmm
and like even the suburban independent bookstores, like I just saw my family in South Jersey, and there's like this really cool place. I'll shout it out. It's called Ren's Coffee House in
hmm
Blackwood, and it has like used books and new books, and like it was just such a really fun vibe and like really artsy. And it's like interesting how suburbia is now having like these spaces of like spoken word. And yeah,
hmm
I feel like everything has just like expanded out.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
And
absolutely. I live in Staten Island and there's a great
yeah.
poetry scene like on the North Shore. There's so many artists that are doing a lot of amazing things out here. And I would have never expected that either because, I grew up in Bushwick before
Mhm.
it was gentrified, before it became, an art central, you
Yeah.
know? And, but again, for me, it'll always be going back to that nostalgia of what things used to be like, whether it was the Lower East Side or the East Village or the Piers, so,
Yeah.
but we have, our histories, we have our stories, we have, you know, others that we can inspire through our work.
Yeah. Well, and then you have like I feel when you talk about the Lower East Side and the 90s, like
Mhm.
so many like I know the millennial generation or even Gen Z, rent just like comes to the forefront of
Oh, I
their
loved
mind.
Rent. Yes.
Yeah. So like, I think that so for you, Ren like is still a really interesting piece of work.
hmm
Like even though it might still, like we were saying, it doesn't get to the heart of every issue.
No, and but just to see a reflection of our lives up on stage or in film or in books, it still meant so much and it was still inspiring. I mean, when I was so one of the reasons I started writing was because I was working at a bookstore, A Different Light, which is one of the few gay bookstores in New York City. They had locations in San Francisco and LA also. But I started picking up some of the books on the shelves that we were selling, and by like Essex Hemphill or
Oh,
Audre Lorde,
yeah.
and people who wrote from the body, people who wrote from experience, and that sort of gave me permission to do the same. So, you know.
Yeah, it was like I talk about Brooklyn. I'm rewatching Girls and the Lena Dunham series, and like I
Uh-huh.
think a lot of it is in Bushwick. Um, but like I was just in Williamsburg at the Twisted Spine bookstore, like with a
Uh-huh.
friend. And like Williamsburg, they have like a video store. Like I feel like they're really going back to like the early 2000s
hmm
nostalgia. Um, but yeah, you're right. Like I even feel like in these spaces, it's like a mix between like there can be very wealthy, like very
hmm
white privilege lives, but there also can still be like an underbelly of an artist scene. It's just
hmm
like, a lot of like um people living just such different lives coming to
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if they're coming together necessarily in spaces,
Yeah.
but like they're on the streets together. And
Yeah.
I mean like
Yeah. Well, it's
is
like
yeah.
it's like the symbol of New York City. Like everyone takes the subway, everybody
Yeah.
takes the train, and you don't know, who's wealthy, who's not, who's, you know, got the privilege, who doesn't.
Yeah.
It's
And
just
you do like so many interesting things with, like your own identity, but also like when it comes up against whiteness. Like I
hmm
mean, I
hmm
really love, and I know you're like kindly going to read, which I really appreciate, but like what you do in your poem, Unpassable,
hmm
with that idea of like white queer men and like their
Hmm.
expectations. So, I mean, if you would, Emmanuel, will you read Unpassable for us?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, it's a poem about identity, and I'm just gonna go ahead and read it. Let's go. Let me just find it up here in my notes. Okay. I've suffered not just for the color of my skin, pero for what it meant when I opened my mouth and didn't apologize. Never passed for anything but brown, no olive-toned ambiguity, no accidental whiteness in the right lighting, just brown, just target. Indigenous in my blood, Taíno, Inca, doesn't matter. The history don't change just because your textbooks forgot to mention me. I spoke perfect English in classrooms that only heard my accent. I prayed to white Jesus beside relatives who warned me not to bring shame to the family name. I shared sheets with white boys who loved my lips, but not my truth. Their hands searched my body for proof that I was still less because maricones like me weren't meant to succeed, not in their world. There was always a ceiling, a checkpoint, a white doorman saying, not tonight. Even when I wore the right labels, swallowed my pride and memorized their fucking grammar. Not man enough for the hombres, too femme for survival, less than even the women they call strong just before killing them too. We're the enemies they won't name unless they need a villain. Queer boys like us, brown, black, Asian, mixed, alien in every senses. We're welcome if we know how to bow or bend or beg or bite back. Lick enough balls, and maybe, just maybe, you'll get your Fox News moment, your fake pearls, your broken mirrors, your George Santos fantasy. But I'd rather be broke and free than rich, Republican, and erased.
Wow, wow, so powerful.
Thank you.
Oh, there's so much to talk about there. Um, well, I know poets all have very different thoughts about this, but like, when you then discuss your poetry or have someone discuss it, like, do you get excited when others have their own interpretations, or do you have like your own view of, okay, I wrote it, like, I don't really want to know what people think about it? The spring season is here, which means there's a new issue of the Gay and Lesbian Review called Victorian Times, all about my favorite period of literature, the 19th century. And you'll see a rugged Walt Whitman on the cover and the dandy Oscar Wilde. Well, guess what? My first article is now published in the Gay and Lesbian Review called Once Upon a Time in Camden. It's the intro to my book, which looks into their queer literary relationship, but also Whitman and Wilde's homoerotic poetics, and specifically what Whitman does with male same sex desire before the category of homosexuality even existed. Like, how did he even express this in his poetry? Well, you'll have to read my book to find out. Book coming soon. If you know of a publisher, let me know. I'm shopping around right now. But this Victorian issue is so special with the Gay and Lesbian Review. There's articles on Dr. Jekyll and Victor Frankenstein. I'm about to see The Bride, which I can't wait to see. And right, Guillermo del Toro's new Frankenstein is all the rage. There's an article on Monte Cristo's Women in Love, Tchaikovsky's Men. I love Tchaikovsky's ballet. I'm particularly an admirer of The Sleeping Beauty, one on Captain Cobb. There's film and TV shows reviewed like Heated Rivalry, Boots, Kiss of the Spider Woman, which, if you don't know, I had an episode with Jeremy Fox from the Gay and Lesbian Review, the managing editor, and Colin Carmen and Joseph Federico, and we talked all about Heated Rivalry. You have to listen to it. And Kiss of the Spider Woman, I keep recommending to everyone. It is an astounding film. Boots, I actually had the creator Greg Cope White on the podcast too. You'll have to listen to his interview. Also, if you haven't heard our episode on the kink issue of the magazine, it's really, really interesting. And the ethnography one. And yes, there will be an episode soon about the Victorian issue. So get your hands on the Gay and Lesbian Review. The digital subscription is really easy to get, glreview.org. The print subscription also, head on over to the website, click subscribe, use the promo code ITBR Choice. You get a free issue of the magazine. Choose the Victorian issue, will you? So head to their Instagram, their TikTok. I love the Gay and Lesbian Review. I get so many book recommendations, TV show, film recommendations. One of the films that I can't wait to watch is in this issue. I want to say it's pronounced Pillion or Pillion. I think I made it French there with Alexander Skarsgård. So enjoy your reading, everyone. And if you're reading the Gay and Lesbian Review, please reach out to me. I want to let them know, that you all listening to this podcast are reading their magazine. Now that the spring semester is here, I am so excited to let you all know about a publisher, an independent publisher that's celebrating 40 years of great books called Broadview Press. I love Broadview Press. I have so many of their editions of classic literature like Wuthering Heights, which is coming out soon, and it's our book club choice. And they have so many academic books for instructors and for students and the general public. So I've had so many exciting guests on, from guests talking about The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, guests talking about vampire literature, horror literature. I'm looking at you, Jeffrey Andrew Weinstock, whose book actually just came out called Horror Theory. Look it up. And I cannot wait because I have two exciting guests coming on soon. And I've recorded their episode, so I know that it's going to be such an interesting conversation. The first is Rachel Tukalski, who wrote a book called Writing on Fire, a fierce yet friendly guide to writing humanities essays in college. I've used excerpts of it for my Writing 2 course at Montclair. It has gone over so well. I just love what Rachel does. And we get into this in our episode about this metaphor about writing on fire, like how that's a great way to think about free flowing, brainstorming, creative ideas, and getting into that flow state, which, as Rachel explains, happens not just in writing, but in many other avenues. And then the other guest that I have on is David Starkey, who wrote a book called Academic Writing Now, a brief guide for busy students. It is designed to cover the basics of a college writing course in a concise, student friendly format. Each chapter concentrates on a crucial element of composing an academic essay and is capable of being read in a single sitting, which, for a generation, myself included, I think all of us now, just consumed by digital media or just this attention grabbing technology, reading in a single sitting is definitely a plus. So head to Broadview Press, use the promo code Ivory Tower, and you'll get 20% off every single book in their collection. There's also a really cool digital library collection they have. So if you're a librarian, take a look at that. Message me. If you're a librarian, I'd be happy to show you what that new collection looks like. And I hope you all enjoy your reading.
No, I absolutely love that because it's interesting to see how different people walk away with what is either written or heard. Um, I mean, I think at the end of the day, ultimately, and I've always said this, it doesn't matter whether you don't have to be like queer and Latino to understand my poetry or my Spanglish or what I'm saying,
Mhm.
um, because it could be universal. Somewhere in there you could identify. And I've had like, different audiences. I've read in front of different audiences, and the best is like with some like little old white lady from the Midwest comes up and tells me, that they've been in my shoes or they've experienced something similar to what I have or whatever. And it's just so beautiful because it brings people together, you know. Um, so yes, I love to hear different interpretations of what other people walk away with, because then it's like, oh, wow, cool. I never even thought about that, because I have my own
Mhm.
version. I have my own reason for having written the poem. So to hear somebody else maybe come up with a different angle or a different viewpoint is like, oh, all right, that's really cool.
Yeah. And my barber, he's also Nuyorican
Mhm.
and from Brooklyn actually. Uh but he's a poet too.
Oh,
Like loves to write poetry. He loves doing salsa
uh-huh.
classes. And like what he says is so interesting is
Hmm.
like bringing the cultures together in terms of like just speaking from the heart about your own identity and how it resonates with
Yeah.
other cultures, like you said about the white woman from the Midwest.
Hmm.
And what I find so powerful about your work is, you're not shying away from topics like, that you're not going to bend the knee or bow down to a white or a colonial history, I should say, of like settler colonialism that tries to ignore indigenous cultures.
Hmm.
And like my thought is, well, why would someone feel threatened about actually exploring true history? Like the indigenous
Hmm.
culture is part of our history. And like if someone is like even like what you talk about with the line about I shared sheets with white boys who loved my lips but not my truth. Like that feels like
Yeah.
it brings to light that idea of like fetishizing
Yeah.
the brown or the black body.
Absolutely.
And that like
It's
in the queer community, it's not like racism doesn't exist or
Yeah,
fetishization doesn't
absolutely.
exist.
Absolutely. Well, there's a difference between fetishes
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and racism, and yes, even within our own community, historically, there has been a lot of racism. Like I said before, a lot of our voices were pushed aside. We didn't want to be, seen because they were trying so hard to like fit in and be like, well, we're just like everybody else, we just want to be married and have children and, we
Mhm.
just want to, you know, um, but there's this beauty in that diversity, even in the heterosexual world. It's great to be, um, you know, not necessarily married or not necessarily have children, or you can do what you want with your life as long as you're not causing harm to anyone else and you're happy with who you are and how you live your life, then what does it matter? I mean, it's just, you know,
Yeah. And where does that like in your own life, did you feel that you had to be quiet or like it
oh,
almost sounds like the speaker of your
always, yes.
poem like is shrinking. It's just like has to like doesn't feel like they can just
Yeah,
be out and proud.
yeah, well, because at home I wasn't, I mean, I grew up believing that being gay was a sin and I was going to go to hell and it
Mm,
wasn't great. And, there was something wrong with me and I needed to change or I needed to fit in or I need to find a way to be attracted to women or, whatever it was. It was just, that's just how that was what was implemented into my soul, into how I grew up. And, um, I discovered, fortunately, for better or for worse, at a very young age, that freedom at the piers.
mhm.
And I was like, oh, like, but then in order for me to be able to go back home and finish high school and all that, I had to like repress all of that and just keep quiet and not talk about it. you know,
Mm,
until, I got to a point where I was older and it was just kind of like, no, no, this is all wrong. You're wrong, not me.
mm.
So,
Yeah, and like I know that your other work, specifically, I'm assuming your poetry book about if Jesus were gay,
mhm.
uh like kind of reconciles that idea of queerness and religiosity, like
Yeah,
specifically Catholicism, because I know you were raised Catholic. Um,
but I'm an atheist.
but you're an atheist, yes.
Yeah.
Um, do you think like how have people responded with how you like explore the intersection between, spiritualism and queerness? Like, do you hear a lot of interesting responses with like those from the queer community?
Well, yes, because I believe in right and wrong. I'm not, I'm not just, I believe there's beauty in every religion, whether it's
Mhm.
Catholicism or Buddhism or, Judaism or any religion. I totally respect that. At the end of the day, I believe there was a great man that once walked this earth, and whether his name was Jesus or Muhammad or whatever it was, he was just a great orator and a great person that brought people together. And I think people just use that story, to gain power, to gain control. And there's a poem about it in the book,
Yeah.
um, Sacred Without Permission, if I remember. And like for example, like the poem of Jesus Were Gay, the title might be like controversial. It'd be like, ooh, what is he talking about? But when you read the poem, it's about, people coming together. It's about love. It's about unity. It's about, like I may be an atheist, but I'm more inclined to like, support the Pope than support Trump. It's just like what kind of world are we living in where, like people are questioning their own religions because of somebody else's power, you know?
Mm, mm.
Religion should be about spirituality and your truth, and whether you're religious or not. Um,
Well, so what do you think is so threatening to those who want to ban certain topics or those
mhm,
who want to censor material? Like, why can't they understand that, like, there is a history before colonialism?
mhm. It's about control. They want to
Mm,
rewrite that history. They don't want people to know that, maybe we've made mistakes or that, there are horrible things that we can learn from to become better, because either they want to repeat that or they just don't want the truth to be out there.
mm,
And that's what's really scary about, the current state of the world.
yeah. How did you find, like, what was it for you that you were able to work through, say, like the homophobia from your family, or like those in your life trying to, repress
Mhm.
your truth, repress your identity? Like, how did you make peace with yourself and like just embrace your authentic self?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I went through a period where most of us as queer people can relate to of, self-destruction, where I even went so far as to attempt suicide, when I was younger, um, because I felt like I did not belong. There was something wrong with me and I would never be happy. So, um, I, you know, I'm glad that I got to that point where I realized that, I am here for a reason. God put me here for a reason, if there is a God,
Mm,
and, I can be a better person, a better version of myself, and just give off, you know, the love that I want in return, you know.
mm,
Um, And, sadly, you know, to this day, that not everyone makes it to that point,
Mm.
where they can be true with themselves or honest with themselves or love themselves.
Yeah.
But
Like,
but it's important, especially within our culture, because there is so much negativity and so much hatred toward us to find that joy, to express that joy, and to share that joy. I think that's what I try to do with this book, because my work has always, there's always been a rage, there's always been an anger,
mm.
but yet, it's important to share that beauty and that joy, you know.
Yeah, and the sacredness,
Hmm.
like your sacredness, like,
Yes. Yes, because we're
yes,
all sacred. We're all
yeah,
deserving of that.
yes, yes. And to actually know that and
Hmm.
realize that is powerful. And I don't know, I think it's a part of like being self-actualized, which is a hard,
Hmm.
like Maslow, the psychologist, like theorized was really hard to achieve that because there's so
Hmm.
many other obstacles.
Obstacles, yes.
Yeah. Well, if you will, I feel like we could turn to your poem When I Was Puerto Rican because that kind of like continues this theme, like these emotional layers about, your childhood upbringing and then, where we see
Yeah.
you now.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
interestingly enough, I mean, it was like during COVID that, I never met my real father. And I grew up believing through a rumor that he was Puerto Rican. So I really embraced that culture. My mom was Ecuadorian. And then I found out that he's very much alive and he's living in Florida and he's actually not Puerto Rican. He was
Oh, wow.
Ecuadorian and married to a Cuban woman. And so that's kind of what this poem came from. It's called When I Was Puerto Rican.
Mhm.
For decades, I claimed half a flag, maybe born of Taínos, raised by coquis, seasoned in pernil. Even when Boricuas called me out as counterfeit, I waved La Bonita Bandera and danced with my New Yorican pride. Red, white, and blue meant more than stars and stripes. It meant El Caribe, a home I imagined in my blood. Iris Chacon was my madrina. Walter Mercado, too, don't ask. Tato Laviera, my padrino, my soul baptized in agua de coco. Turns out my father was never Puerto Rican, but his machismo, as real as mofongo. I grieve what was never mine. A plagiarized dialect, a history worn like a borrowed guayabera, still warm from someone else's skin. The poems I once wrote in Spanglish confessions now sound like echoes from the window of La Vecina. What do you do when the island in your heart turns out to be driftwood? Still, I carry the rhythm, the salsa step stitched into my bones, the poems Miguel Algarin whispered into streets that didn't care where your father was from. And maybe that's enough to love a culture, even when it, even if it never truly claimed you back, like my father never did.
Bravo.
Welcome to Severed, a podcast suite dropping new episodes every Monday. Severed True Crime and Severed Paranormal episodes deep dive into murder, mysteries, and the otherworldly in a concise format. A 7-minute story to frame the case with thoughtful analysis and our usual banter.
We sometimes find the lighter side of darker cases. We offer 3 spin-off shows, Severed Strange Stories, Severed Haunted You, and Severed Serial Killers that highlight the unusual to lighthearted topics from the digital dumpsters of true crime, haunted universities, and the minds of madness like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer.
We are your co-hosts. I'm Harry Chambers.
And I'm Drew Hudson. Listen on all major podcast platforms, including Rogue Media Network and Radio Garden State. Follow us on Instagram at severed_podcast.
Are you a fan of classic Hollywood movies? Are you a fan of queer cinema?
Then do we have the podcast for you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Garcia.
And I'm Luke Delmar.
And we are your hosts of That Old Gay Classic Cinema, where we take a look at some of the greatest films of all time and analyze them through a queer theoretical lens.
Let's be honest. LGBTQIA plus people have been a part of Hollywood since its inception, and this podcast celebrates those artists and entertainers of yesteryear while also taking a closer look at the queer-coded characters and stories in classic Hollywood films long before queer representation entered the mainstream.
So follow us down the road of classic cinema as we give you a guide to some of the films that touched our hearts, brains, and even gave us courage to be ourselves.
You can listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
All right, listeners, we're ready for our close-up.
People
Well,
often ask me like, "What's your writing process?" And
yeah.
it's just it's not. I just write things down and try to like piece it together into something that's cohesive in the sense of a poem.
Mm. Well, you must, I'm assuming, because I mean, I absolutely loved Bad Bunny during the Super Bowl and just like
Yes.
the way that he has really brought in so many communities and he's like
Hmm.
not shying away from like queer representation and
Hmm.
like feminist ideas. So like I feel like when you bring up the idea or that line, like turns out my father was never Puerto Rican, but his
Hmm.
machismo as real as mofongo, like, comparing like, that his machismo is as real as that like food dish.
Hmm.
Um, like he's Bad Bunny is so counter to machismo.
Hmm.
I know, and I kind of wonder, do you think that that's like we kind of brought that up already about like being threatening to like a more traditional view? Is that why Bad Bunny like he's not understood by certain people in like say
Yeah, they
white
threaten.
culture because he kind of goes against those
Yeah, he's
ideals?
doing his thing. He's very real in who he is, and they're threatened by the fact that he paints his nails, or he could dress up as a woman, or he embraces queer culture, even though he's not part of it. But he embraces us. He appreciates us. He loves us, and you know, um, and I think people, feel very threatened by that because they see someone who's really successful and really speaking to a whole generation of people, and they don't want that to happen because,
Mm.
again, they want us to all be a certain way, the correct way, whatever that is.
Mm. Well, and
And I love that he challenges because that's what
yeah,
we do as artists. We challenge people to open their minds and think
yeah.
differently.
Yeah, artists are supposed to shake us
Yeah.
out of normalcy or whatever normalcy is, like shake
Hmm.
you out of just being complacent.
Hmm.
And well, do you think machismo, I know this is going to be a loaded question, but bear with me. Do you think machismo is still alive and well in the Latino community?
Um, yes and no. I think we've come a very long way. There are a lot of men within Latin culture who are very open-minded because they've either experienced a queer relative or a queer friend, or they're just or they just see people like Bad Bunny, or see things on television or whatever that kind of open their minds. But then there are people who are definitely still trying to repress our community into believing that you know things have to be a certain way, where the man is here and the woman is there, and there's gays are like abhorrent and should not
Mm.
exist. And um so in Latin culture we call it machismo, but in other cultures it's just you know the patriarchy,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah, which, you know, in certain segments of white culture, the patriarchy is definitely, we could see that reflected in the shitstorm of politics right now.
Yes.
Alive and
Yeah.
well. Or they're trying to keep it alive and well, right? Like
Yeah.
they they want to control. Like you said, they're
Because they're afraid. They're
yeah.
afraid of, they're afraid of women. They're afraid of gays.
And
They're
they can
afraid of
see that
people of
they're
color.
losing
Hmm.
power.
Hmm.
Like, and people aren't listening to that
Yeah.
or following that ideal. And I think that's what's, you know, it literally is the
Well,
system is
there are
being,
still too many people following that ideal and
well,
following
that's true.
those
That's true.
beliefs, unfortunately, of
That's
both
true.
men and women, and
Yeah. Well, even your
and even
reference of,
gays.
yeah, well, even your reference of George Santos, like, and
Hmm.
his, right, gay, um, I think, is he from Brazilian parents
He's definitely, well, I don't
or
want to shame
Portuguese?
him, but he's
Yeah.
part of our community, sadly enough. But
Yeah. But like even how, you know, like he became this token or they used
hmm
him as like, well, look, we have, you know, a gay like person of color. Here you
hmm
go. And then like he, you know, he wants to be as close to that power as possible, but
hmm
like is
And
never
where did that get
fully,
him?
well, yeah, it got him into a lot of legal issues. Um, well, he has a lot of things going on, but
Hmm.
uh, yeah, I mean, I guess you could say the same thing of like Kash Patel and what's happening with,
hmm
you
hmm
know, like trying to pledge allegiance, but are you actually fully accepted for your diversity?
hmm
You know, it's like when they're using people as tokens for propaganda, that's
Yeah.
problematic.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but you know, I also, you know, had asked if you could read one more poem just because I feel like it's such a love letter, but it also speaks to this idea of like care and community that you
Mm.
so like nicely articulate throughout your work. And oh, could you explain that quote? Because I feel like it's really part of this poem. The quote, brown hands, queer hearts. Like what you mean by this quote that's said in the blurb by, and I don't want to mispronounce the person who writes it. So, can you say who the person is who writes that in your blurb?
Yes, it is Rock Raquel Salas Rivera. And that line is actually from one of my poems from Here We Will Stay. And so I love that they pulled that language back into the blurb. For me, Brown Hand speaks to ancestry, to labor, to survival. And the Queer Heart is about love, vulnerability, and defiance. So that line is kind of a manifesto for the book. You
Yeah,
know, it's
yeah,
about not separating those identities, but holding them together. You
yeah.
know,
And I
as a
feel like
brown
your
queer Latino.
yeah, and I feel like your poem with the city, your body, our history, the way that you balance this like how the city, Manhattan, New
Hmm.
York City serves as this place of possibility while
Hmm.
also like, you know, listeners will hear and you know, if you're watching on YouTube, will see the way that the city also holds a lot of sadness or a lot
Hmm.
of trauma.
Yeah.
And like just you said, you never know who's on the subway. Like you never know what people are going through. And it's like
Hmm.
someone might have just gotten a promotion and the next
Hmm.
person just found out that a loved one passed away.
Yeah.
But you're all sharing the same space.
Yeah. I'm trying to get to the next place.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So if you will read that poem,
Yeah.
that would mean so much.
Absolutely. And it's the first time I'm actually reading it. Like,
Oh,
yeah, I've done a couple of events this past weekend, but this wasn't part of that set list. So it's called the City, Your Body, Our History. And it's about friendship, the city, and loss. And I wrote it for my friend Stephanie. We held hands all the way home, backseat of that Uber, Manhattan glittering like it always does for those who believe in happy endings. I swallowed tears somewhere on the highway, the skyline a love letter we both understood. You told us to go home to get some rest, but we knew. Up in Harlem, the nurse held your final breaths while morphine wore off like a slow goodbye. I thought of cupcakes at Magnolia's, how we thought we were so Sex in the City, starring a tall black lesbian and a sassy brown peer queen. The cab driver noticed us sobbing, hands clasped tight, but still, I was thinking about hospice, about your mom and sis, about the fact that I had just seen your tit for the first time, trying to make you comfortable in that bed. We kept our masks on because COVID was still real, and we couldn't risk bringing you anything except love. And then, fuck it, let the waterworks flow. Grateful you married us, became besties with my husband, saw me have my pretty woman moment. Puerto Rico, Donna Summer, Brian forever an old soul trapped in the body of a middle-aged man. Before him, it was you, listening to my sexual misadventures, my mother drama, laughing at life like it could never take us down. Brian knew I was crying, but just let me be. We both knew then and there this was the last time. Are you okay? He asked. And for a moment, I thought everything would be just fine until we got home, until we got the call. We never got to celebrate your 60th the right way. All there is now is life without you, with the city, your body, our history fading into the distance.
Oh, so beautiful. Um,
Thank you.
Not only like do you bring to life this, you could just tell, powerful presence in your life. This, you know, Stephanie, who you've
Mhm.
said, uh, the poem is dedicated to, but like just that power of like the black lesbian, meets, this queer Latino, Noyorican from the piers and like this powerful friendship, but also how then she becomes part of your history with your husband.
Mhm.
Like, at once it's like a poem of friendship, but also of partnership
Mhm.
and like marriage. I
Yeah.
mean, but also grief. I mean, there's so many layers here.
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like there's the highs, the lows. Like, you're not, like, it doesn't just sit in the grieving process is so complex. And I feel like that's what this poem shows us.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, for me, queer friendships, especially between men and women, have always been these really deep, sustaining bonds, and that this poem lives in that space. Um,
Mm,
I mean, I remember all the women that were there for us during the AIDS crisis, you
mm,
know, um, and I mean, there's also there's also gays that are not fond of lesbians, and lesbians are not fond of the gays. But at the end of the day, we're a community of people who've been outcast and want to be loved. And, in that, we could find each other and love each other and form this community, this large, vibrant, diverse community that
yeah,
deserves to be remembered.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought up like that stereotype because I feel like,
Hmm.
again, that's another way to try to divide the community,
Hmm.
and it's a very like straight, in my opinion,
Hmm.
like those who are in power trying to further divide the LGBTQ community or
Yeah, I
like,
mean, absolutely. There's patriarchy even in the gay community, just like there is racism,
yeah, and
sadly,
transphobia
and
too.
transphobia. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, the way that you bring keep her memory alive
Mm,
is so powerful.
thank
Yeah.
you.
And just the way like this, the allusions to like Sex in the City and Magnolias, like again, it has that like the romanticism of the city,
Hmm.
but also like, okay, well, what's the reality of where you're going? Yeah,
Yeah.
but that is the city. Like the city is, I mean, all right, all places, but especially the city, like, you know, the heartbeat of that fantasy, but then, you're not always going to be on that high of living in the fantasy world.
Yeah, there's a certain reality. Like when I get to travel and see these beautiful cities, like, like in France or London or, wherever, in California or wherever I am. And then, it's one thing to be a tourist and then it's another thing to actually live there, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, that's the way I felt after I returned with my husband from Madrid in February.
Hmm.
Oh, I loved, again,
Yeah.
right? Like I had that like wide-eye tourist view of just like
Hmm.
absorbing everything. But yeah, any day-to-day reality is going to have its obstacles.
Yes.
Uh, right? Maybe some places, you'll be able to find peace and solace more easily, but
Yeah. There's
again,
no real perfect utopia. Every
no,
place
no. And when
has
people
its
have tried it,
struggles.
when people have tried utopic
Hmm.
places, it never lasts
Hmm.
forever.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, because the human condition, right? Like what you bring to bear is,
Hmm.
we're messy, but we also all have so many emotions.
Yeah.
And, you know, no one is perfect in how they're constructed and
Yeah.
created. But
Yeah.
like you say, we are all sacred. We are sacred beings.
Yeah.
Um, well, this has been such a pleasure. I feel like I loved being your student, which was just, you know, I don't want that to, go without saying how much of a pleasure it was to hear you speak and
No,
to
thank you
talk with you.
so much for this opportunity and for letting me, share these poems and share this space and reach, your audiences. And I think at the end of the day, this book is
Yes,
about,
yes.
about remembering, about holding on to people and places and, histories that might otherwise disappear. So I think that's
Yeah.
what this book is trying to do.
Yeah.
So thank you
Well,
so much for giving me this platform.
of course. Well, and how can everyone get that book? You get your
Um,
poetry book.
you can get it directly from the publisher, Rebel Satori Press, or you can support your local independent bookstore. You can, check out bookshop.org, I believe, that will guide you to, places where you can find the book. And if you don't mind the capitalism, I guess you can go to Amazon or you can pick it up at, like I think Walmart or
Yeah,
any
yeah. Barnes
other
and Noble.
Barnes
Yeah,
and Noble. Yes,
yeah,
wherever you can pick up the book, just, please support independent artists.
yeah. And how
That'd be
can everyone find you on social media? Like if they want to see where you're going to be speaking or events you'll be
um
doing?
yeah, well, I have my website's emanuelxavier.org. That's one M in Emmanuel. I'm also on Facebook and I'm on Instagram.
Wonderful. Yeah, so Emanuel Xavier on Instagram.
Yes.
Yeah, and your website's name is your name, so very
Yes.
easy.
Yes.
Well, Emmanuel, it's been so wonderful having you on. Excited for more, you know, people to get their hands on your poetry, and yeah,
Thank you.
congratulations on, your next book.
Thank
Um,
you.
Hopefully, I'll
Oh,
have you on again in the future. Well, your memoir, yes, your memoir, which is also a screenplay, right?
no, they're two separate
They're
things.
two
So,
separate. Okay, so there's the memoir, and then you're working on a screenplay.
yeah.
Okay.
So, yes, I have a literary agent and I have a memoir, and the memoir is finished and the proposals are going out and it's being shopped around. So hopefully that will be my next book. And that's about as much as I can say about it. But for now, there's still your sacred, and hope everybody picks it up.
Oh, thank you, Emmanuel. Well, until next time, and this was such a pleasure. Thank you
Thank you. Yes, it was
again.
a pleasure for me too.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.